If we only try to do the right thing, surely we are very poor Christians. We have to do something more than what is right. Watchman Nee, sit, walk, stand. Today, I'm going to walk you through a Bible study that I've been working on these past couple of weeks. It's not perfect and it's not all-encompassing. This is just my journey to process. And what I'm calling this is a Christian's response to war. There are a lot of current events going on right now, and it seems like the Christian community has kind of been energized to kind of talk about this topic. And I just want to share a little bit of my perspective as I've been processing and digesting and trying to make sense of everything. And this is where the importance of studying the Bible comes into play and why it matters. All of the biblical theology that we learn, all the systematic theology that we learn, understanding our basic foundations of faith that I talked about in the previous video, all of that is kind of the background and the foundation and the basis for how we process and understand and view the world today. That informs our decisions and it also informs our life. And this study is kind of helping me to see what is the real life application of these verses and how does that manifest in my life? Because how we view the world on this particular topic should be different than what the world is saying at this time. And what is that difference? That is something that I want to uncover and unpack. Doing the study is not going to give a simple solution to a complex problem. In fact, I don't think I can come up with the answers to how to resolve the conflicts that's going on around today. But perhaps it can give an individual person a starting point. The first place I want to get started in is Genesis 1:26-27. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make human beings in our image, to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and all the small animals that scurry along the ground.' So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them." Now, these verses in and of themselves seem pretty basic, This is when God is making the entire world, and on the sixth day, he makes human beings. He makes humanity in his image. And I think that's important. Each human life holds value and that it's valuable, not because of the stuff that we're made of or that we're better than the animals, but that we are an image of God, a reflection of God. And however that is defined, whether it's our conscience, the way we can make choices and rationalize things, that's not really what I'm talking about. God values us. We should also value human life as well. Going into systematic theology by Wayne Grudem, I think he has a good explanation of this concept. So I'm going to read a little bit from his book. "Every single human being, no matter how much the image of God is marred by sin or illness or weakness or age or any other disability, still has the status of being in God's image and therefore must be treated with the same dignity and respect that is due to God's image bearer. This has profound implications for our conduct toward others. It means that all people deserve equal dignity and rights. They deserve the full protection and honor as human beings. If we ever deny our unique status in creation as God's only image bearers, we will soon begin to depreciate the value of human life and will tend to see humans merely as a higher form of animal and will begin to treat others as such. We will lose much of our sense of meaning in life." And so this is my perspective on Genesis 1:26 and 27, where we see human life not as being created beings, but being God's image bearers, and that we have to see as a foundation to see humans as human people, as people worthy and valuable of dignity and respect. And we have to treat them so, and it has to play out in our world. In times of conflict and pain and hardship, it can be easy to see people not as human. It can be easy to see them, to otherize them, to put them in a different category that's not the same as ourselves. But it's hard to say, if you put them under the same umbrella as us, to see all of us as humans, not to also see that they are worth something. They are valuable. They have names and faces and identities and emotions just like us. No matter how much pain and violence and suffering that's been inflicted, that has to be our basis and starting point. Now moving to the next step, I call it lament. In Romans 12, especially verse 15, it says, "Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep." And the rest of the chapter really talks about, how we should view the world. But just focusing on this verse, we need to empathize with the people who are suffering. We need to weep with those who weep. We mourn with those who mourn, not just on one side or the other, but on both sides, seeing the humanity of both sides and how both sides are suffering. Not to say one is better than the other or any of that, but on a human level, at the core base level, we can see all the suffering, we can see all the pain, and we can empathize, we can lament, we can wrestle with all the complex emotions these things bring up in our lives, and we can take it to God. We're not ignoring that. It is a valuable process. We need to sit, we need to lament, we need to understand and see all the pain and suffering and brokenness and fallenness in this world. And it really should move us. And we should go through all of those emotions to deal and process with them. And that is an important step that we sometimes miss in this world. Sometimes we are too eager to skip through the grief and pain and sadness that we want to find a solution. We want to find a resolution. We want to move forward and push forward. But you can't do that unless you first sit in the pain, sit in that silence, in that in-between space where it seems like we're not doing anything, but we are. We have to be present for the people who are suffering. And sometimes that means we need to learn more. We need to gain understanding. Maybe we need to search history of this conflict, understanding what's going on to get an overview of how things are happening. But not only that, on an intellectual level, we also need to hear the stories of the people going through it. We need to hear these stories, to humanize them, to put a face, an identity, and an understanding to know that as a common human, we need to build up a community. We need to be that community, to comfort the ones that are suffering. I know in some spaces there is a call to look into end time prophecies, looking into what the prophets say, looking into what it talks about the future coming judgment and all of these things. But I feel like those are not as helpful at this time. At this time, even if we look to those end time prophecies, I think the focus is more on that call to repentance, that need to see the pain and suffering in this world and how we need God to come and change us and transform us so that we can build and construct a world that moves beyond, where there's no more pain, no more suffering, no more brokenness. But that cannot happen if we do not choose to see people as people first. And not only that, that they are all suffering, that they are all in pain, and that we all need to go and look to Jesus and look to God for that transformation. We cannot be like Jonah. We cannot pick and choose who we give the gospel to and who is allowed to join in God's kingdom. We need to open it up to all people so that all may come and see God. The whole point of lamenting and comforting those who are suffering on both sides is ultimately to show that there is a better way than sides. And that leads me to Joshua 5:13-15. So in this context, Moses had led the people of Israel out of Egypt. They spent 40 years in the wilderness. And now, after Moses has died, Joshua has become the leader, and he is allowed to take the people of Israel to the promised land. But their first major obstacle is the city of Jericho. And while they contemplate what to do next, this is at the point in time where the people of Israel decide to renew their covenant with God. All the males are circumcised. They have Passover. They finally eat of the food in Canaan. And the manna that God provided them, The divine food that he provided for them ends. And this is the story that happens in between. When Joshua was near the town of Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with sword in hand. Joshua went up to him and demanded, "Are you a friend or foe?" "Neither one," he replied. "I am the commander of the Lord's army." At this, Joshua fell on his face to the ground in reverence. "I am at your command," Joshua said. "What do you want your servant to do?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did as he has told. Now, this is kind of an interesting situation because Joshua is encountering this man with a drawn sword. Looks like he's ready for a fight. And Joshua asks, pretty logically, "Are you a friend or a foe? Are you on my side or their side?" And the man gives a kind of cryptic answer. He basically says, "No, I am on God's side." That is something that we need to see as well. Jesus is kind of like the same way. When people ask Jesus a question, is it this way or that way? He says, "No, you're asking the wrong question. There is a better way." When it comes to understanding this idea, what is the third way? I think we can see it in Matthew 5:38-48. It says, "You have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court, your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask, and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. You have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. For he gives sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain to the just and the unjust alike. If you only love those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different than anyone else? Even pagans do that. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." This is part of the Sermon on the Mount, and this is one of the main teachings of Jesus in his main speech to the people. And it clearly shows almost the impossible third way for us to wrap our heads around the situation. And that is to love our enemies. And this is probably one of the hardest things to do in real life, like practically, like in your brain. You may think, yeah, of course, we need to love our enemies. But when we see those people standing in front of us, when we're able to identify that, I think it's a lot harder to put it into practice. And sometimes we may think that it is impossible to do. It is something hard to do. It is a struggle. Because how can we break that cycle of violence and generational trauma and bitterness and anger that festers in our hearts? And the only way we can really move forward and process it is by doing this. This is something that we will fight against, and we will not be perfect in doing. I'm not perfect in doing it. But it is important and paramount. Otherwise, we will be paralyzed in this cycle of violence and suffering forever. There's a story of my friend with her young child. And her young child kept having these night terrors in the middle of the night. Just screaming, shouting, flailing all over the place. And when she heard her child, she ran to her and embraced her and gave her this really big hug. Even if she was getting punched, even if she was getting kicked, even if she was getting pushed away, my friend just continued to embrace her child, softly telling her, I'm here with you. Don't worry, I am here. And even though her child was wrapped up in the dream, her eyes were closed, she could not see. She could only see the nightmare in her head. My friend continued to embrace her child until finally her child's eyes opened and saw that it was a dream. Her body calmed and relaxed, and the dream was over. And she woke up and she saw her mother holding her, letting her know that I am here. Just that presence is a comfort. We need to do that for the people around us, for the people experiencing that pain and heartache. And it might not be that physical presence. Sometimes we're not able to do that. We can't reach out. We may not have a neighbor or coworker or community that we can directly influence and impact. But even in a show of solidarity, just to say, I am here, I am with you. I know all of this pain and suffering that's happening, it's not right. And we agree, it's not right. And we will do what we can to help. At the same time, they have to do the hard work too. And we can only come alongside them to assist. We can't fight their battles. We have to be the ones to move forward, to help push through all the pain and suffering so that we can move forward into a place of healing and peace. True peace. There's a quote from Watchman Nee. It says, God never asks us to do anything that we can do. He asks us to live a life which we can never live and do a work we can never do. But through His grace, we are living it and we are doing it. It is not in and of ourselves that we are able to love our enemies, but rather it is God and Christ and the Holy Spirit working through us that we are able to do these things, because that is what Jesus has done for us. That's why we pin all our heartache and pain and suffering and frustration. We take it to God and God absorbs it. He takes it. He comforts us. He sees us and He lets us know, I understand. I know, and I am here. I am here with you. If we look into our past experiences, even the experiences of the people around us that we know how this all plays out. We know how the cycle of violence can just keep on continuing, how we just keep on hurting each other, but nothing will be resolved until somehow, some way, we need to see beyond our differences, to see our similarities, to lay it at the feet of Jesus and see how He can transform it and how He can give us a better way ahead. What does that look like in today, and how can we practically live that out? We can support humanitarian aid and sending medical equipment and those types of resources. Not only that, we can reach out to our local communities, our neighbors, our co-workers, our friends that are actually being impacted by these situations, and we can ask, what can we do for them? Maybe that's if we see prejudice, if we see discrimination, to reach out and support them and let them know that that's not right. Maybe we need to help and provide protection, to walk with our friends when they go to school or class, and make sure that they are not being harassed, that they have safety. And maybe something that pushes us harder, that might be a little naive and idealistic, is we can look for solidarity. What if American, Israelis, and Palestinians banded together? What if Jewish and Muslim and Christians banded together, and people all over the world stand together to ask for peace, to ask to stop the fighting? I think it sends a bigger message than any resources we send to do, any mediators we really send. It is, these are the people that have been directly impacted by these conflicts, and yet they can stand together. I think that would be a great goal to pursue. I think some people think that, all these events are happening outside of our place. It doesn't matter. It's out there. And maybe it's harder to see in different places and regions and locations, but where I am, it feels as if you can walk down a couple of blocks and you can see the whole world is in one city. You can walk around to different neighborhoods and you can encounter almost like traveling the entire world in one place. So we can't say that it's happening over there and not here. It is happening here too. It affects the people here too. And I think we have a responsibility for that. We have to be able to look across the sides. We have to be able to see beyond our borders. We have to be able to see beyond these differences. We should all band together as human beings, not even just Christian or non-Christian, but that we should all unite together and make a statement of peace. That's how I see we bring the kingdom of God up there, down here. I see it in articles like in The Atlantic, where Japanese Americans were speaking up for Muslims during the post 9/11 age. They said there's a strong history within the Japanese American community to speak up for Muslims. That wasn't the case back then in 1941 or 1942. Incarceration was widely accepted. The only people who did speak out against it were church groups. This quote is referencing to how the Japanese Americans were interned during World War II. The only people who spoke out against that were church groups. Can we say the same thing today? That when we see suffering, when we see the dehumanizing of people, That the people who rebel against that, the people who refuse to see people as other, but as part of us, are the church. As Christians, can we see that? That's what I hope. I hope we can do that. I hope that there are churches and Christians out there that just refuse to pick sides. Not to say one side is right or the other side is right, but that there is a third way. The third way that God chooses for us. We are on God's side. This is what God's side says, is to love our enemies. I'm hoping that we can see more articles out there that say things like an interfaith coalition of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim people band together to help and support migrants dropped off in sanctuary cities. Or how Vietnamese Americans embrace and assist Afghan refugees and recognized what they are experiencing now is what we experienced when we came. And we don't want people to suffer. We don't want people to experience what we experience. We want to take our pain, our experiences, and our suffering and use it for a greater good to show people that there is a better way. Now, this may be not an organized Bible study per se, but I hope it just gets you started in thinking about what we can do as Christians and how we can view war and what is our response to it. This is how I understand it, and this is kind of the responsibility that is held in my heart to do. We can't sit on the sidelines and say we do nothing, but at the same time, we need to see the complex picture of what's going on as a complex picture for what it is, and that there will be no simple solution. There will be no easy way to go about it. It is going to be a hard and difficult road ahead, and it will require complex solutions. And it has to come from the local people. It can't come from outsiders telling you what to do. That's not how it really works. Only true transformative change has to come from the inside out. We can only pray and hope that they will see things differently, that they may say that this is enough, that there has to be a better way. And that is my hope. And I think that as we close, we'll just stop here. We will just be reminded of what Jesus accomplished for us. It's not because we are better. It's not because we are blameless or that we do good things, but rather Jesus paid the price for all of our sin and our brokenness and pain. And he absorbs all of our pain and brokenness and anger. And he comes around to comfort us, to let us know, I understand and I am here. I will be with you. And together we can make an impact. We can do the impossible things. We can take that third path and find a different way, and maybe a transformative way in which we can live in this world together. So thank you so much for coming with me on this journey. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.